You are now listening
You are now listening to the Black Male Educators Alliance podcast.
Lifting our voices.
Lifting our voices.
Welcome back. A new episode of the BMEA podcast, Lifting Our Voices.
What's up, man?
Dr. Curtis Lewis is back, man.
Yes, sir. Yes,
man,
sir.
It was tough missing you, but I'm glad you're back. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. My nephew passed away, unfortunately, last week. So I'm dedicating this show to him. Shout out to my sister holding it down and the rest of the family. But I'm doing all right, man. Been really reflective, thinking about a lot of things that's going on around us. So I'm looking forward to some of our discussions today.
Absolutely. And I think, whenever tragedy hits us like that, it kind of sometimes makes us lean harder into the work, right? Because what we do is important, and it can help us kind of get with the grievance. So, my thoughts and level with you.
Appreciate it.
During that time, man. But I'm excited about this episode, too, man.
Yeah.
We want to, we got some current events. There's elections coming up, a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
And but speaking of elections, there was a clip, someone running for Congress from Louisiana. He has a clip. It was very interesting. I want us to play it really quick.
History repeats itself, especially when we lie about it.
And who's up next?
Me.
Come on up.
So it is wise for us to tell the truth.
My historical hero is Christopher Columbus.
Who do we allow our children to call their heroes?
In 1492, I set sail to find the continent of Asia. But instead, I stumbled upon a new land, or so I thought.
If we tell them that a ruthless conqueror was a great explorer,
surprise! There are already people there. So I pretended to be their friend. Wink, wink.
that murderers were respected leaders,
I killed as many as I could, with diseases that spread throughout the land.
and that thieves and enslavers were savvy businessmen.
Some I kept as servants, others I sent to Europe as slaves. Well, I like the ones that survived.
Who does it benefit to hide the truth, if anyone at all?
In 200 years, they won't tell you that I slaughtered an entire race of people to steal their land.
But they will say they sat down and shared turkey.
They won't explain that I laid the groundwork for the American slave trade.
But they will force the descendants of slaves and slaveholders, indigenous people and immigrants, to call him an American hero and be happy about it.
Wonderful presentation.
History repeats itself, especially when we lie about it.
So it's wise for us to tell the truth.
Because if kids knew the truth about history, they'd all choose better heroes. I'm Gary Chambers, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate to help build a better future for our children and hope for tomorrow.
Let's go.
So, before we even get there, let me just say this disclaimer. We don't get into the politics and advocating for one person over the other.
Right.
It's down in Louisiana anyway, but we just wanted to show the clip. So, just wanted to put that out there on behalf of the organization.
Absolutely.
But we can get to talking about it. It was well
Shout
done.
out to that brother for at least, even as a politician, making education somewhat at the forefront. I know what he was going for, but oftentimes education is not one of the main components that people are running from. But how did that? Tell me your initial thoughts, man.
I'm gonna try to keep this under 30 seconds. It's problematic, man. We just recently, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, they just had this banning books week, which I know it was sort of the librarians across the country sort of coming together to sort of fight against that whole idea of what books are banned or not. And I just think it's just this new way. I ain't gonna say it's new in a sense that it's in the mainstream media now. But this new wave of this idea that we're going to choose what we teach, be selective on what we allow kids to read. It is anti-education. It is anti-intellectual. And I think, it's intentional the approach is intentional because it wants to keep people from understanding and being knowledgeable of what this country is about, which, let's be clear, you can love this country, right? Which I do. I love the United States of America. But I'm also very critical of the United States of America as well. And things that you love, people you love, you got to be critical. That's part of loving, right? And I think this idea that we choose to, there's people, adults, I ain't gonna tell you where, right, that don't like still believe Christopher Columbus like discovered America. Like they grow and they about to become teachers. Right, and they believe this work, and so it is scary, and I think it's something we got to pay closer attention to, because if we don't, we're putting people in classrooms that are making decisions that's impacting like kids' ability to understand who they are, understand historical context of things, and we're doing this without actually paying attention to its impact. Right, like I have adults who are learning to be teachers that don't know history,
the truth.
They don't know the truth.
The truth.
They literally would go. They were telling me, and they're young, that they were taught that Christopher Columbus discovered America, and the fact that we're still celebrating this, but we're still celebrating this, and people choosing. I know we're changing it to some folks change to Indigenous Peoples Day, but like it is still on the calendar as Columbus Day,
right?
And particularly some cities and schools say we're out for Columbus Day. That's problematic, right? And it's disrespectful. And at this point in time, you would think we would be different. But again, and I'm going to shut up, the scary part about this is, and not just to Christopher Columbus, it's everything.
Yeah.
I got people don't know when the slavery ended. I got people who are becoming teachers who don't even know anything about the civil rights movement. They don't know anything about Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. The fact that they were poll taxes and all those things that we're doing, like they have no clue. Some people actually think that the majority of the people in this country that are poor are actually black folks. So there's a percentage, but like the population, the number of people, it's white people. It's more white, poor people by pure numbers, but there are more white people in this country. But people don't know that. Yeah. And they're about to go teach. I said I was going to be 30 seconds.
I mean, it's one of those things where like, take your time, Pastor, right? Because you preach it. You know what I'm saying? And my biggest struggle is how do we say we're educating folks if we're not telling the truth? How do we say we even educate black children if you have people in front of black children that don't know anything about black people?
Yes.
That's the root of this issue. You know what I'm saying? And I think what you see with that clip is that this country has done a really, really good job of making white heroes, historical white heroes. Mm-hmm. And then when you uncover the truth about those heroes, a lot of it is flawed.
Yes.
A lot of it is terrorism.
Yes.
A lot of it is massacre and savagery, right?
Yeah.
But that's not how it was taught. We about to celebrate Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Coming up, and I'm not going to turn the plate away, but, I'm not going to turn the plate away, but if you think about the context of that and we're at Pocahontas and how everything is tied together to tell a story, and one thing that's really important is that, like, education isn't just happening in the schools. As a country, as a culture, we teach all the time through TV, through film. You know what I mean? That's why it's a big push. That's why I'm always frustrated with like how they depict Africa or Egypt and ancient Egypt, because even regardless of whether or not it's classroom, people learn that way. Yeah. And what we know for certain, and we can see this in education, a lot of people don't even know the true history of their own country, right? So how are you teaching it?
It's American history, right?
American history, not black history. American history.
It's American history.
It was a really good quote. Part of the problem is that we teach slavery as black history instead of teaching slavery as white people's history, right? And we have to start there. And so that kind of takes us to the focus of our conversation today. You know, you actually put me onto this book, so shouts out to you, man, the scholar that you are, right? Post-traumatic slave syndrome, right, by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And it's so essential for people to be reading this.
Man,
everybody.
It's funny, man, because I say this should be a required reading for anybody going into teaching.
Facts.
Right? I want to say this, and I want to say this for the record. Like I don't want to hear this idea that like this only, we only should be, doing this kind of work with teachers who are teaching in schools with predominantly black and brown children. Yeah. Right. In schools that are predominantly white, we need to be doing this. Because this is American history, right? History. And it's helping us make it sense. I teach a wonderful group of people at an unnamed university, and it just boggles my mind when I realize how much people don't know. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know, you're in danger of repeating history, right? And I think there are some people out here who would like for us to go backwards, right? And so this book really does a really good job of setting sort of historical context into why, folks are, or there's a sort of a mindset around schools, or how we engage kids in schools, or how kids come to schools, right? Thinking about trauma. You want to talk about trauma. Like, trauma ain't just like something that just happening at your house, right? Trauma is inflicted on you by society often. And actually schools, then you go into school, it only perpetuates it, right? So schools continue to inflict trauma on kids who are already coming in traumatized by the things that they have to go through in society, and maybe coming from great homes. And we got to get away from that. And I think sometimes we focus a lot like, particularly black kids, they're traumatized because of their home. Like, no, I'm traumatized when I cut on that TV.
Right.
I'm traumatized when I go to school, on my way to school, going to school.
Yeah.
Right. I'm traumatized by what I saw my uncle go through, or my brother go through, or my sister go through. But the cops, or whatever the case may be, right? And so we have to begin to, and I say this all the time, man, it's about human and human interaction. It really boils down to human interaction. Do you believe that these people are humans?
Right.
And should be given respect, mutual concern, and dignity. That's it, right? And this book does a good job.
That's the beginning. No, you.
I'm saying, man, it's been on my brain, man.
I already know. No. and that's why they got you in front of teachers. This is super important, right? Because we're talking about. I often feel like we pretend like we're trying to find solutions to something, but we really haven't even like settled in what the problem is. Right. We haven't, right? You just talked about trauma, but all we talk about in school is what? Data. Yeah. Test scores. Yeah. But if you know there's trauma, what did you think was going to happen? Yeah. If you know it's trauma, what did you expect? Why do you think the boy is angry? Why do you think the girl is angry? Why is she not paying attention? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And then on top of that, because we don't know your history a lot, and I know you've seen it, a lot of these people are coming into these savior complexes that are misdiagnosing all, because you're not saving anybody, right? And even so, you are taking the assumption that something is wrong with them, and not because you understand the historical context. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so we don't go into school and into education from a trauma informed place, right? And we definitely are going to it from a like cultural understanding of black people in this country or in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't get addressed across the contents. It doesn't get addressed. It doesn't get addressed early because there's a lot of talk around like what you can teach kids elementary in terms of like race and understanding. And it's like black children are black from the beginning. You know what I mean? And I was talking to another one of our colleagues earlier about, oftentimes because our schools are so ran down and underfunded and doesn't have great teacher preparation, a lot of black parents think the solution is to do what? Send their kids to white schools, right? They might have the power and the money or the opportunity to do that, not realizing the school's not necessarily better. No. Now you have a whole different trauma because you have to deal with race. Correct. And those kids aren't learning the truth either. Correct. So you just created a different problem. Correct. Not what I mean? It's just a different problem, right? And we can have, and I don't want to say it's an argument, but we have that debate oftentimes about PWIs and HBCUs, which I think is different because at that point you're in adulthood, and I do think there are pros to both that help shape you as you are. Yep. But think about our babies. Yeah. Think about our babies, right? Being the only one in their classrooms, right? Or having a teacher that might have some racial bias that you can't even address because we can't even have a conversation. They ain't even read the book. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, starting there with teacher preparation, there has to be some sort of like requirement around historical context and understanding of black people in this, or just this country in general. Absolutely. And beginning with the truth of it, right? Absolutely. Yeah, we got a whole, teacher preparations accountable, and also these fast track programs, like these alternative certifications, the same thing. Like, I know we have this desire and this need to it's a need to get people fast tracked into teaching, but we got to look at sort of the consequences of that as well. Yeah. Right? Like, we're just getting people, and I'm not saying that's not like we don't need them, but like, what are we doing to influence? Because this is not only like a white person issue. There are black folks that go into these schools that are also inflicting harm and trauma on black kids because that's all they know. Yeah.
Right? They haven't been challenged, right? And to be thinking differently. And they get caught up in what, white supremacy, and this is what I thought school needs to be, or whiteness. This is what whiteness and excellence in whiteness look like.
Yeah.
Not excellence in blackness, excellence in whiteness. Yeah. And they begin to inflict those expectations on our kids, and then therefore traumatizing them by doing the same things that I've seen that oftentimes, unfortunately, more in some black teacher classrooms than I've seen in white teacher classrooms. Right. And so I think it needs to be something that regardless of how people are entering this space, they need to be having these conversations, get into books like this, get into Gloria Lasser-Billings' book and Chris Emden book and all those other folks who are talking about what needs to happen. We got people talking about it. Right. We got people talking about it. So we gotta, who gets hurt at the end? Our kids. Right. And so we gotta, hold teacher education programs accountable. We got to hold these alternative certification programs, and we got to hold schools accountable. Principals, superintendents, boards, all of them accountable to this, to doing what's right by all kids, because all kids need to understand the impact that slavery has had on generations of people. All kids need to understand that Christopher Columbus was not a hero, but he slaughtered, murdered hundreds and thousands of people, right? We have to understand that, and we have to acknowledge that, and just be like, that's real, right? Yeah. And not get into this idea of like, let's hide it by not talking about it. Yeah. Because then who we hurt in the long run? And so and I talk about this in my classes when I teach at this unknown university. But I'm gonna keep it unknown. I'm gonna keep it unknown today. It's a real good one, but I'm gonna keep it unknown today. Because I love all my students, right? But one of the things I talk about all the time, right? And I tell them all the time, we got to begin to look at each and every person as humans, right? We got to look at everybody as human. And if I don't see the humanity in another person, then I shouldn't have no business even trying to teach them. And one of the classes I'm like really focusing on them understanding the humanity in teaching, right? Teaching is really about working with other humans, engaging other humans, bringing out or cultivating the brilliance in other humans. Yeah. Right? And we begin to do that. I think that's the start, right? But we don't. We see people as objects, or like this is that. No, they come from this. Versus this is a human that has a right to be respected and loved and cared for in this classroom or this school that I go to. And our schools got to do better too. We do. But my bad. Go ahead.
No,
bro.
You're right.
I keep saying my bad.
No, listen.
My bad.
One thing I said, just to your last point, because you made a ton of good points, and I want to scale through all of them. But the last point you made, right, about seeing kids as humans, right, and I think oftentimes I've said it before in front of white and black teachers, and they say, well, no, of course I see my kids as human, right? But so if you did, right, and this is you work here and you work for children, right? Technically work for children. Do you see them as your client or your customer, right? And do you treat them that way? Or is it about appeasing you? Yeah. Or is it about like appealing to what you want? Do you admit your mistakes, right? Do you build an actual relationship? And what does that look like? Right. Because I think I've said it a lot in schools and PDs and I've also reflected on like, well, do they understand what I mean by that? Because if it doesn't come natural, and if you have a bias against black people, then it is a very hard thing to do to build a relationship, right? Right. An authentic one. Right. And we talk about that so much because that's really the heart of an organization. Like we're an educational organization that understands that relationships is the catalyst to any other thing that you need. Learning, you know what I'm saying, growth. And also understanding trauma and healing from that trauma, you have to have relationships with people that are going to be able to help heal that for you, understand your pain, and help you walk through that. Because we have a lot of kids who walk through those halls, go class to class with trauma that is untapped, not talked about, and not nurtured, right? Yeah. Yeah. But you want them to do math. Yeah. They come to the class, you upset, you yelling about them putting their head down. You didn't ask them what happened. Right. You didn't say, you need a couple more minutes? I'll get a couple more minutes. You all right? You get enough sleep? There's this, like, I've seen it all the time. There's this, like, natural thing, like, I need a classroom management, discipline. Just like they don't know history. I don't think people even know what those words mean, right? And thinking of trauma, right, going back to the book, so the general idea, because I know, there's a lot to it. General idea is that trauma is passed through genetically. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people know that. I know we don't teach that directly in schools. Yeah. I don't know what's going on in biology class, but maybe we can kind of ramp up the rigor in there and start talking about it, right? But trauma scientifically is passed down through generations, right? So speaking specifically about African Americans, like going through one of the most traumatic experiences known to like in human history, right? Have we acknowledged how that comes out and how does that come out in black people, right? Because we can say, when people say, that was hundreds of years ago, you've been free, your parents been free, right? Not including Jim Crow, not including redlining, not including police brutality, right? But or internal racialization, because you mentioned before, what one people continue to like really underestimate is how anti-blackness permeated the black community in itself,
and also the brown community,
We ain't gonna
talk about LA. We should go. We should, because anti-blackness is real, like you said, and it was on display in the city council in Los Angeles, which is and this ain't, and I love my brown folks, like for real. Yeah. Like I wish we were, more connected and together. Yeah. But this ain't nothing new. Yeah. In some parts of the Latino community, the brown, like this is real. Like anti-blackness is real. I grew up in Chicago, right, and so that was real. That's the most segregated city, one of the most segregated cities in the country. Facts, right, and so we were very separated, and we were oftentimes as black folks looked down upon by everybody. Right, and so we got to own that, right, and make sure we are, because I talk about this in my class. So I said, the whole divide and conquer thing. The amount of poor people in this country who all need and want and desire the same thing, you would think if all poor people, regardless of their race, got together and built a coalition, how powerful that would be.
A young Chicago brother thought about that. They killed him quickly, though.
They did, right? And how powerful that would be. But what we do in society, we find a way to divide. Step on each other. And like, I don't want to be the lowest of the lowest, right? And they've oftentimes pinned brown and black folks together, right? And so against each other, right? And so like what you're seeing in LA is ramification of this is years and years of this happening. So I wasn't shocked like, oh my God. No. Anti-blackness is real. Across all races, and that's what we have to be okay with. Like, I love my brown folks, but we also got to do better, right? Across
they need
the board.
to know too. I mean, they need to know too.
I love my black folks. We got to do better when it comes to that.
Absolutely. No. You're
my bad. I know you was going on that.
The anti-blackness is worldwide, right? You can see it everywhere. You go to different countries, right? As a Black American, and you see how they treat the black folks in their country, even though they treat you differently because you're American, right? And so then what I also say is, because I as much as it breaks my heart, I do understand that is a component of white supremacy, right? It all goes back to that. So I don't. It isn't like a natural thing that I'm like, oh man, all these racists just hate black people. I think it's all part of the system.
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely.
Unfortunately, and but even bigger than that, if the world is anti-black, and our children are coming into this world in the schools where they learn about themselves and about the world around them, and the schools are anti-black, how do we expect them to grow and learn and do anything?
Schools are anti-black, ran by anti-black CEOs, making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the name of helping black kids, but taking the money and not even attempting to do anything about it. Right, and I think that's the thing too. It's so much malpractice, but also we're stealing from schools. Like these, I get so frustrated, man. And y'all got me on the wrong day, but like and we know schools are struggling financially, right? Yeah, that stimulus money gonna be there, it's gonna be gone. Yeah, and I'm doing work. We do work across Michigan, across the country. We, New York, like we got places where we go and see the same thing. Yeah, it frustrates me when I see salaries and what other people are doing in these positions, and teachers, we're not getting resources. Students are struggling. People are only there to only continue the perpetuation of anti-blackness, and some of them are black, right? And I think some of us get so caught up in sort of this power that we forget why we're doing the work. And so it's frustrating because I think I put a lot of this on schools, and there's some schools out here rocking and roll. I saw this video, and we should talk about that one day, not today, but the school is one school in Brooklyn. trying to do the work. Right? They're really trying to do the good work. And I think we should highlight them and talk about them. But there's so many schools across this country that are run by like some black folks that they're beholden to these boards that are white and also anti-black. And for whatever reason, we are like, people are not ready to take risk to say, no, I'm not okay with this. We're not going to, because now we got all these test scores coming back now, right? Here we go. Here we go. Right? The SAT is the lowest it's ever been.
Yes.
We got, the scores here in the state of Michigan are lower than they've been. Sort of the reading proficiency has sort of gone backwards since the pandemic. Like all these things, right, that we knew like was possible. But like a part of that is actually BS too.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, wait, but what about the great things that are outside of I know I made that clear, the deaths and all those things that occurred during the pandemic. There were some actually good things that came that we talked about we was going to do differently. Right. But we haven't. Yeah. We went right back because guess what? It's easier to go back to the status quo to do the same thing. Nobody want to put in the work.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. And on top of that, outside of it being easier, I thought there's also, I think, somewhat a design in the plan, right? Yeah. So, we had a early career teacher fellowship session not two days ago, right? And in the session, we talk about education of blacks in the South. Yeah. And in that, some of the problems in 1865 are still here. Right. Are still here. Right. You just mentioned black schools with white boards who are anti-black. Right? You can talk about all those HBCUs, all those normal schools where Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois were trying to open these schools for black children who were recently freed, but white slave owners and planters, what they call them planters, white slave owners, right? Where like, well, yeah, we'll give you the money, but we're going to control what they learn because we want them to be workers. We want them to be, subservient, right? And we're going to make sure that there's no economic or political growth or knowledge in these schools. Correct. Do you see that change today? No. Is there political growth in schools? No. Economic growth? I mean, they got this financial literacy that's coming around. Right. But I think that's more capitalist than it is economic growth, right? And I do think black people need to see the difference because capitalists will keep white people at the top. Correct. And it'll spring a few of us in just for, I guess, gratuity. But economic, right, like our kids want to know how to better themselves. I truly believe that there are people in schools who believe kids don't want to learn. They say it all the time. Absolutely. These kids don't want to learn. Yeah. But like Dr. End is saying, maybe we're not measuring the right things. Maybe the data metrics we have don't actually have any value. SAT scores drop. Them kids still going to college? Man. Them colleges still open? Man. They still paying their tuition? Man. We still graduating doctors and lawyers and nurses? Correct. So, where's the value at? And does this SAT scores tell me did I value that person? Is that person self-confident now? Right?
It never did, right?
Right.
But guess what? There's a population of folks that is impacting, so we're going to start shifting, right? And that's why I think a lot of these requirements at universities are starting to kind of go away a little bit because it's starting to impact everybody. Right. Right? And, when it starts impacting certain people, then
stuff gets moving. We got
to start, hold on, we don't need to do SATs and ACTs anymore for college admissions. Right. We should have never been doing that crap because what does that tell you, right? About people's character, who they are, their ability to learn. Like we don't just stop learning in high school and all of a sudden in college. Like in high school all of a sudden we can measure someone's capacity to continue to learn. Right. Like that's not or what their knowledge base is. Like I did most of my learning I would say in my graduate program. Right. And so therefore I think it's important for us to understand what learning really means and how how it takes place. And it's also an assumption that learning only takes place in school and you can only measure it by a test. Yeah. Right? And a test that is standardized. But actually most likely they had nothing to do with anything that they learn and anything that they would have to do to be successful in their life anyway. Yes. Right? So it's all flawed, and I think we know it's flawed, but it's intentional. Like we intentionally continue to do the work we're doing. And I don't care. People are like, up in arms about the NAEP scores and all this. I'm like, okay. And what it's going to do is continue to give people permission or rationale for going into black and brown schools, poor schools, and inflicting all this other extra tests, very hostile way of teaching and learning. That's all is setting us up for.
Yeah.
Right, but man, I know we gotta get ready and wrap the show up at some point. We can get going, man. You on fire? You got me on fire
because it's real, and I think we're not going to lay out the whole plan for how we're going to flip up education today.
No.
But I think this is the root of it, right?
Yeah.
Like we have to address that something's wrong.
Yeah,
you have to address that these teachers, everyone needs to understand the historical context of this country. I'm gonna stop saying just black people because it's this country, right? And once we start putting that together, I think that's a part of like the change we need to see. So this anti-CRT movement, which is tied, I'm tying it to this. I'm tying to this historical context because the whole purpose in that isn't that they worried about anything other than white children learning the truth.
And it was so conflated. It's so conflated because CRT is not. I learned about CRT in my graduate level course.
It ain't even the CRT they're talking about.
Right. It's not. Right. It is. Right. It is not. And what they did, it was masterfully done. And I'm not saying it. I'm saying it sarcastically, but it's truth. Some truth to it. Yeah, they were done because they got people. Which it don't take much to get people riled up, especially when people already have some dislike or hate or don't see other people as humans. Ooh, yeah, I knew it. That's like it don't take much to rally a bunch of people around that don't want to be at the bottom. Right. That's the whole goal. But this idea, like, nobody's teaching this in kindergarten and K-12 schools. They're not even really teaching it in undergrad. Right. That's like sort of grad school, law school kind of work. What they're pretty much saying and putting in the name of CRT, we don't want to talk about black. We don't want to tell the truth about American history. We don't want to talk about anything that's going to be critical of our country in the past and today. That's what they're saying. And we don't want to talk about that because God forbid you have poor little white kids who are like questioning like their ancestors, right? Like, let's not do that to them. That's traumatizing, right? But I can go beat the heck out, shoot a kid that's sitting in his bed or do whatever, right? That's not traumatizing, but God forbid we talk about history. And I stress this, and I'm gonna shut up. I promise you I am. I stress this that there's facts that we can't make up facts. They're facts, and there's like I even use the word. I'm gonna be nice. Informed opinions that people like put their own stuff together and they come up with opinion about what they think happened. Right. And then there are facts. And I even talk to my students like there's a difference between the two. Right. So like we gonna talk about facts in here, but things we know that happened versus somebody we think this is what happened. Right. Like we thought Christopher Columbus came somewhere. I told my fifth graders this when I taught them this 20 years ago. Yeah. That this wasn't true. I literally just said, you sitting in your house chilling. Somebody come in your house and take over and say, "Now this is my crib." Yeah. How you gonna feel about that? Would you like? Is this your crib or their crib? Right? Was you living here at first or not? Right? And it's really and at that point they were like, "Oh, like damn, that would be messed up." I'm like, "Well, that's what happened." Yeah. Right? So like that's what happened. Yeah. So like, and nobody found your house. Yeah. If you were already living in it. Right? Yeah. That's very simple. And so if we don't begin to just have simple conversations with kids like that on that level, kids grow up like uninformed and then they become teachers and teachers become uninformed teachers. And therefore how we expect them to be any kind of critical consciousness happening in that space where we're trying to push kids to be, we can talk about critical, culturally responsive education. Like we can't even get people to go there if they don't even know the basics. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We can't even get, because we're not going to get to today, we can't even get how children learn through their own culture if you haven't accepted what your culture is and what the truth of the history of this country is, right? Yeah. And so, and we can wrap for sure, because there is no end to this conversation. It's not, man. You know what I mean? But I would say my informed opinion is that we keep Christopher Columbus around because he is a beacon of the beginning of white supremacy on the Western Hemisphere. Yep. That's what he represents. But you have to teach that, right? We're not holding anybody accountable to that action, even though you benefit from it. But you have to teach that that's the history. That is the foundation to so many things. Yep. And the reason why the truth is important is because what we do right now is just kill black kids like self-image. Yeah. That's all we currently do in our schools, in our history, in imagery, how we do the news. Everything is continuously killing black children's image of themselves. Yep. And so much of us spend our time trying to distance ourselves from our blackness, one way or the other, whether it's through money or through proximity to white people or whatever the case may be. We're constantly capitalism. We're constantly trying to like
separate ourselves from our blackness. But why do we do that? Why do you think your blackness is not good? That's taught. That's taught. And so,
man, you know how to, it's time to put the hoodie on that one. You know what I'm saying?
see, I got the hoodless one.
No, you got the hood.
You got good.
This we're going back. But, I want to do a quick shout out before we go, man. Last Saturday, we had a great session. And I'm going to keep this hoodie on, too, because this is our show. And we wear hoodies.
Don't make you no less intelligent.
We wear hoodies. Whole nother day, whole nother conversation.
We'll
put that's another topic. But shout out to the Principal Wellness Professional Learning Community. Last Saturday, we had it was a phenomenal, our second session. This is our second cohort. Our first course. So this is our original cohort. It started last year. This is the second year. And these brothers are like, we had some very deep, in-depth conversations around what we're doing in schools. And, it's learning how to take care of themselves as they do this work, which is hard, man. So it was really heartfelt, wonderful conversation. Always nice to be with those brothers. So, I'm going to shout them out because I'm still feeling good from that conversation that we had with them a few days ago. So shout out to the PWPOC principals. I would say all their names, but they all from, some from Detroit Public School District. It was Detroit Community. What is it? Detroit Public School Community District. Yeah. DPSCD. You got some from the Charter Network. The principal from Redford. So this is our original. These are our original 8 principals, and we got another cohort that we started too. So just want to shout them out. It was really good.
No, definitely shout them out. Shout out our ECTF fellows. On to our third cohort. So we got a lot of young men and women that we've touched, and I've talked to people, and now obviously with mentoring, which I said before, man, I'm so excited about these conversations that we having with these young boys, right?
Yes.
That I've said before that like their consciousness will be the reason why they become educators.
Yeah.
Right, their understanding of their role in their community would be the reason why they choose to, if they do become educators, right? But just in wrapping this around, like what BMEA does, what we do, right? We don't just prepare teachers to be educators, right? We are trying to dismantle the system by going directly to the people who are a part of it, right? And build up this coalition of truly like culture responsive educators, right? That we want to liberate our children. So that's why it's important for everyone to understand the historical context. That's why it's important for everyone to understand what's going on in schools, right? This podcast, we say before, it's not just for educators.
No.
It's for parents. It's for students. It's for white administrators and superintendents. It's for anybody because everybody's kids got to go through school. And I think education, the institution, is one of the few things that touches almost everybody in this country. So that's what we got to change. We want change in this country.
I don't want to educate. I want liberators. Ooh.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm going to leave on that note.
Okay. So we're going to bring them in. Okay.
All right.
Listen, we'll be back in 2 weeks in November. It's been a great episode. I'm super excited. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Thank you, Chris, behind the scenes. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for listening to Lifting Our Voices, the BMEA podcast.
Yes, sir. You are now listening.
You are now listening to the Black Male Educators Alliance podcast.
Lifting our voices.
Lifting our voices.